I'm going to give you the top ways to make your coffee taste better. We got 8 of them, and it's going to be in order of ease, I think. You can do some of these really easily. Some of them are going to require more work, but the show is called Caffeinated. I'm really into coffee. I think you're going to dig these. So, number one, buy freshly ground coffee beans. This is kind of an easy one, but you may be misled as to what fresh actually means. Can be deceiving. Whole bean coffee is at its maximum freshness and flavor within the first 2 weeks after roasting, when properly stored away from light, oxygen, and heat. Now, this is how the trickster coffee companies get you. The ones that I do not feature here on Caffeinated, by the way. Those are blacklisted companies. I need a sponsor, though, for the good companies. You want to make sure your coffee has a roast date on it. It's a specific date your coffee was roasted. It's not a best used by date. Your coffee should not be a bottle of aspirin that has been sitting under your car seat for 30 years. And when you pull it out, you're like, oh wow, doesn't expire for another 30 years. I conveniently have a headache now. Best used by dates are crap. Those dates are weeks, if not months in advance, while your coffee is sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Big companies making a lot of lower quality coffee love this. We, the consumer, do not. Do not buy that coffee, please. 2, grind your own coffee beans, people. Within just 15 minutes of being ground, coffee can lose over half of its aroma. And the finer the grind, the faster coffee deteriorates. What happens is smaller particles expose a greater surface area of the bean to oxygen, the air, accelerating the off-gassing of coffee's volatile organic compounds. Sounds kind of complicated. Let's make it easier. Those compounds are what makes your coffee taste so good. It gives them its, well, taste, so you want them. So if you grind your coffee, put it into a bag, and use it kind of handful by handful, scoop by scoop over the course of a few weeks, the ground coffee is quickly going to lose its flavor. It's not going to taste as good. Within a few weeks, your coffee will be nowhere near as good as when you bought it. And it probably wasn't good to begin with if you had a best used by date on it anyway. So this is even worse if you're buying big bags of coffee. The longer it sits in the bag ground, the worse it is. So yes, grinding your own coffee, it does add an additional step to the brewing process, but it's 100% definitely worth doing if you want the best cup of coffee you can imagine. One you will taste the difference in if you don't mind the few minutes it takes to grind your coffee beans. My wife laughs at me for various reasons, but also because I really do consider it a meditation. I get up, I have a few glasses of water in the morning, and I start like, I'm grinding my coffee beans. And as you get hit with that aroma in the morning of a freshly ground bean, even the sound of the grinder, it's like, it's probably not a good impression. It's awesome. It's a great way to start your morning. You might love it. Give it a shot. Now, if you're using an automatic coffee machine, like most people do, most of my friends and family do, at least turn the grind function off and grind the beans yourself. You can still use that machine. It won't be perfect, but it will be way better than letting your beans sit on the top of your coffee machine for a month. If you're gonna buy an automatic coffee machine, make sure it has a grind off function. They often do, so you can use ground coffee too, which you wanna grind yourself. Which brings us to our next point, or rule, or guideline, I don't know. Number 3, keep your fresh coffee beans in an airtight container. This one kind of goes without saying. Use an airtight canister. They're not very expensive, and the less air hitting your beans before you grind them, the better. The less air hitting your beans. A lot of double entendres in there. Keep that one in. I actually like more air hitting my beans. I think the one I used was like 20 or 30 bucks. It's not too bad. It'll probably last you forever. If you're going to use all the coffee in the bag within a few days anyway, and it has a vent on it, you're probably okay. If not, get a container. Number 4. If you're not using your coffee right away, freeze it. I do this. Number 4 is simple and to the point. Sometimes I will buy a few bags of freshly ground coffee from a company, and if I'm not going to drink them all pretty quickly, which I sometimes do, I'll freeze the ones I'm not drinking yet. Is it probably better to buy a new fresh bag weekly? Probably, but I don't want to run out of coffee. That would be worse. So if a bag or two sits in my freezer for a week or two, totally unexposed to the air and light, my beans are cool. Cool beans, man. My beans are cool. Cool beans. I also live in New York, so if I want more coffee from out of state and more than one bag, again, I'm either putting a larger freshly ground bag in my airtight container or freezing a few smaller bags at a time. Number 5, use the correct water temperature. This one's gonna piss people off because we're getting a little more complicated, but this stuff matters. This is a huge one, and it's a little more complicated than the others. I get it. It's not just a tip. Now it's like you got to think more. But basically, Depending on the roast of coffee, you want a different water temperature. If you're using an automatic coffee maker, don't even worry about this one until you're really ready to step up your game. So me, I use a V60 pour over method. That's my favorite right now. But whether you're using a pour over like a V60 or a French press or even making espresso, water temperature matters. And the way you're preparing the coffee is going to matter too. There's a lot more you can read up about this. But the general rule of thumb is the lighter the roast, the hotter the water you want to extract more out of the roast. The darker the roast, you don't necessarily need water quite as hot because those beans have been roasted longer, the flavor is more easily extracted. Now, that being said, like many things, it's a matter of preference. Me personally, I like dark roast coffee. This is a medium roast, but I like dark roast coffee, and often the stronger the better. So if my water gets a little hotter than the guidelines suggest, I'm cool. I dig it. Other people might not. Rules are meant to be broken, and I'm a coffee bad boy. So I'd recommend you get a kettle with a thermometer or an electronic one if you want to get fancy. Now, as a guide, light roasts 90 to 96 degrees Celsius. I also see people recommend just take the water right off the boil for light roasts. I can see why they recommend that. It's closer to 200. For medium roasts, 87 to 95 degrees Celsius. And for dark roasts, 82 to 93 degrees Celsius. Listen, sometimes it's early in the morning for me. I forget stuff. I don't have my guide. So the other rule of thumb I use, for light and medium roasts, keep it around 95 Celsius. For darker roasts, keep it around 85 Celsius. You'll be okay. Don't go crazy, but it will make a difference. Number 6, experiment with bean to water ratios. Now, this one is strictly a matter of preference, but for example, I use a pour over. You want generally a 1 to 16 ratio as a general guideline. 1 part coffee to 16 parts water. But if I want a stronger cup of coffee like I like, I may use more coffee beans in my brew. This is also nice, I find, when I'm drinking lighter roasts in terms of brew. Like a lot of the single origins I talk about, they're generally lighter. If I want it to be a more intense flavor and still get the flavor of the single origin, I'll use the lighter coffee at a slightly higher ratio. Again, it could be something fun to play with. Number 7, let the coffee rest. This is a huge one. I learned this from Ultra Coffee Master James Hoffman. If you don't know him, check him out. I'll link some of his stuff in the show notes. You will love him. Super knowledgeable guy. He makes great videos. I love his stuff. It's tough to do. I get it. I can't always do it. Sometimes I'm rushing to the gym. I got things to do. I can't wait. So I'm not perfect, right? Health and wellness, it's balance. But if you let your coffee rest after you brew it 5 to 10 minutes, it's just cooling to that sweet spot where it's still hot, but its taste is allowing all the flavor notes to come out. It is out of this world. I know you're like, are you kidding me, Charlie? You've given me 15 things to do. I got to do all this stuff. Now I got to wait to have a cup of coffee. This is BS. I'm going to go, put Huberman back on. I get it, but I just smoked a brisket for 17 hours and I ate the whole thing in about 3 minutes. Not myself. And it was amazing. The brisket was amazing. So delaying gratification can make for some incredible results, some incredible tastes. And delaying gratification can also be a really good practice in life for you in general. When it comes to health and wellness, diet, fitness, all that stuff, delaying gratification is a huge part of it. Even if you're waiting 5 minutes in the morning and that's like your meditation to help you practice delaying gratification, might not be such a bad idea. Number 8, this is a really cool one. It's a fun one to suggest. You should try more coffees than you think you should. I love this idea. I know I love dark roasts, but that's also why I have a subscription for single origin coffees, which are usually much lighter in roast level, like we said earlier. I know what I love already, but I'm open to try new things that I might really enjoy. Some of the coffees I've tried, I haven't been too nuts over, but Atomic had a light limited release last month. It was the Ethiopian. I loved it. I featured it on the show. I also love the single origin dark roast too. Coffee Bros has a Sumatra that I really loved. We featured a single origin from Coffee Bros last week, the Costa Rican. Try more stuff. You'll grow your palate. You'll probably find some new things you'll love in the process. You won't regret it. And lastly, we have a bonus. You thought there were only 8. I got 9 in there. There's a bonus. 9. Don't saturate your coffee with milk and sugar. Oh, here it comes. The backlash. Got the bottles of coffee, mate. I have an enormous sweet tooth. I love sweet things. I love milk and sugar and ice cream and all that stuff. But I'm telling you, coffee is an acquired taste. And the more you taste it, the more you try it, the more nuances you can pick up and the more flavors you can sense. It was crazy. I had this coffee taste set we were gifted a few weeks ago. We just had the baby. And I kept talking about one of these coffees. I kept saying, like, it's the fruit notes, the fruit notes. And I was picking them out. And lo and behold, you like open the envelope and you're like, oh, it was, and those fruit notes were in it. I wasn't imagining it. I was tasting it because I'm like kind of developing the palate. Now, I'm not a coffee aficionado connoisseur. I'm amateur at best, but you can develop your palate, just like wine. Does that mean you can never add things to your coffee? Of course not. I usually drink my coffee black, especially when it's hot. But when I'm drinking cold brew, which I often brew myself, I'll use a little Fairlife. I'll throw some Truvia in there. It's not about being crazy about it. Do what you want. But I suggest you do start looking at your coffee like you would an amazing cup of wine or something like that. You'd probably never water down your wine. I certainly hope not, anyways. So, those are the top 8 plus bonus ways to make your coffee taste amazing. Listen, I hope you use them. I hope you enjoy them. Let me know in the comments your favorite way to get your brew going. I hope I don't get too many carried comments. Also, tell me if there's a coffee you think I should feature on this show. As long as it's freshly ground, I will get it. I will check it out, and we'll talk about it, all right? Thanks, guys. All right, time to refill. Gonna dry my voice out, but it just tastes so good.